Hey, happy Thursday to you. Here we are. I tell you what, is it my imagination or is this month just absolutely flying by? Welcome, everyone. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And this is what I call my morning musings. We are currently involved in a thematic study of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the doctrine of the resurrection. This is video number 45, by the way. And Paul said that the resurrection that he is discussing in 1 Corinthians 15 would be at, quote, the end. Now, it's generally taken for granted by virtually all futurist paradigms that the end that Paul has in mind is the end of time, the end of the Christian age. I am challenging that concept and suggesting to you that the resurrection of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 was at the end of the Old Covenant age of Israel that occurred in AD 70. I've been presenting some evidence. Number one, the Christian age has no end. The Bible nowhere teaches that time will end. Well, that kind of deflates the idea that Paul's talking about the end of time or the end of the Christian age. I've been demonstrating also the parallels between Paul's doctrine of the end and what Jesus said about the end of the age and the resurrection in Matthew chapter 13. Now, in the last video, I demonstrated that Matthew chapter 13 is drawn directly from Daniel chapter 12. And by the way, most scholars agree that in Matthew 13:43, Jesus is directly echoing Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, the righteous shining forth at the time of the end of the age at the resurrection. Okay, well, you know, there's a sort of kind of a new concept that has jumped up. And that is, well, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, at that time, Michael shall stand up for your people, and those written in the book shall be delivered. Or at that time there shall be great tribulation, such as never been since the beginning of the world, nor ever yet shall be. And those who are written in the book shall be delivered. And guess what? Verse 2, resurrection. Well, obviously, there seems to be a direct connection between the tribulation and the resurrection. But some former preterists are now saying, well, no, you have to understand that chapter 12, verse 1 refers to the antecedent discussion, which obviously is true, by the way. And Daniel chapter 11 is referring to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. And then in verse 2, Daniel begins to see the events of the time of the end of time. So they insert a humongous gap between the deliverance of the people written in the book and the so-called end of time. Now, to say this is specious and to say this is desperate is to be kind. I want to make a couple of really, really quick observations here. This is not only in response to those who are making this wild claim, but it is also to simply demonstrate exegetically that there is a unity in Daniel chapter 12 between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 7. Okay, now watch this. For then shall be great tribulation, such as has never been. Now, here is point number one. Indisputable fact. Jesus cites Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 in Matthew 24, 15 to 21, when he speaks about the coming great tribulation in the first century. Now, is it possible that the events of the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, 2nd century BC, were typological, and that Jesus was applying the events of the time of Antiochus Epiphanes in type, but saying the typology would be fulfilled in his generation? Possible. But it still means that the Great Tribulation would be in the first century. Okay? Point number two. I don't believe that's the absolute proper explanation for it. And here's the reason why. In passage after passage after passage in the Old Testament, the Great Tribulation and the resurrection are joined together. They are Siamese twins that cannot be separated. By the way, in my book, the resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, future or fulfilled, I give you passage after passage after passage demonstrating this in an irrefutable and powerful way. So, what that means is, in all of these other passages, from Isaiah, from Jeremiah, from Hosea, from Micah, in all of these other passages where the Great Tribulation and the resurrection are inextricably bound together, all right? Then if Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2 do not belong together, then guess what? That means it's a total exception to the rule. And by the way, it does not destroy the idea that the Great Tribulation and the resurrection go together. Absolutely does not destroy that. So, you have Jesus applying Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 to his generation. You have the irrefutable fact that the Great Tribulation and the resurrection go together. Point number 3 is that in Daniel chapter 11, you actually have a contextual break from the discussion of Antiochus Epiphanes and a shift to the focus on the days of Rome and the Roman supremacy. Therefore, when Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 says, at that time there shall be great tribulation, it's referring to the days of Rome. By the way, I document that in this book. So, when we have Jesus' application of the great tribulation to his days, when we have the absolute direct connection between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection, and when we have the emphatic declaration in Daniel chapter 12, 6 and following, that all of these things, tribulation, resurrection, righteous shining forth, end of the age, all of those things would be fulfilled when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Folks, I'm sorry. If we're going to accept the testimony of Scripture, unless we can break and deny Jesus' application of Daniel, the connection between the tribulation and the resurrection, oh, and by the way, there's so much more. I haven't even touched the hem of the garment here. But unless we can break these connections, then guess what? Daniel chapter 12, 6 and 7 puts all of this together in a cohesive passage. Oh, and I just got to mention this. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24, 31, spoke of the gathering together of the elect from the four winds at the sounding of the great trumpet. Well, that's a direct echo of Isaiah 27, 13. The sounding of the great trumpet for the time of the resurrection. And Jesus said, oh, by the way, the rabbis all said that Isaiah 27:13 is a resurrection text, okay? So here is Jesus citing Isaiah 27, which is, by the way, a source for Daniel 12, and Jesus emphatically declaring that the sounding of the great trumpet for the resurrection would be in his generation, verse 34. We have a cohesive, united, powerful statement that the resurrection, at the time of the tribulation, time of the end, time of the righteous shining forth in the kingdom, would be when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Let me recommend to you that you get a copy of my book, The Resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. Don't forget, I discuss whether or not Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 or verse 1 is talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Extensive documentation in here. You're not going to find this information much of anywhere else, okay? Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, order the book, send me a note saying that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, saving you $5. Well, here we are, Thursday. Thank you again so very much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. We hope to see you on Monday.